Do you find you can't get enough spooky goodness? Then by Jove, you need to check out the Generally Spooky Patreon. For the princely sum of £4 a month, you can enjoy our main episodes a whole day earlier than the general public. If that doesn't float your boat, you can become an £8 a month spooky trooper. You'll get the main episodes early and access to 12 extra Patreon exclusive episodes, with more to come. The episode that really tickles my pickle is about Private Wojtek, a brown bear that served in World War II. As a top draw £12 a month Spookmaster General, you'll be on Cloud 9 with access to our Wee Blether series. In it, my darling wife and I debrief episodes, play games, and chitter-chatter about our goings-on. You'll also become a member of the Spooky Book Club, where Eilidh is currently reading us Peter Pan, having just finished Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Simply marvellous. Did I mention you also get 10% off our quality merchandise if you join? You bet your bacon you do. So come join us. Get your peepers over to patreon.com/generally spooky and support your favourite rapscallions. Tally-ho!
Greetings, friends. Do you have a taste for the unknown? Are your days plagued with thoughts of the strange and morbid? Has your thirst to know about the world's most sadistic killers ever been quenched? If not, then I'm here to help. Join me on the Nightcap Nebula podcast, where I, your humble storyteller, take you on a glorious ride into the mysterious universal abyss. Learn why your neighbor might be harboring a really horrible secret, or if that conspiracy theory you thought was false turned out to be real. Whatever your dark desire, you'll find it here. Follow me on Instagram at the Nightcap Nebula Pod for updates to the show, and listen anywhere you get your podcasts. Until then, be safe and stay curious. Now, back to your program.
Hello everybody.
Welcome back.
Welcome back to the Generally Spooky Podcast.
Welcome for the first time, if this is when you're joining, but this might not be the best one for you to join on.
Yes.
Since this is a part 2. And the end of a season, which is always when we're the most mental. Because we're tired.
We're just getting through, pushing to the end.
I don't think that's true. I'm still having a very, very good time.
Well, that's true.
I'm just tired.
Yes, a little bit more sleep would be greatly appreciated, but...
Because I'm very happy doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's just taking a lot of my time at the minute.
Yeah.
And impacting my sleep.
Because we are, of course, in the middle of an epic saga of Edinburgh Castle.
Yeah, this is an epic.
Yep. Apologies to those who were awaiting the release of the first part. There was a technical issue with our podcast platform, and the episode didn't get published.
It's up now.
So it is up. But yeah, by the time you hear this, part 1 is definitely here.
Well, hopefully, because if you're hearing this, this has to do the same thing, so...
Yeah, it's not... Oh no. Oh, it'll be fine. It'll be fine.
Thank you to TheoG99 on Instagram, who was the one who alerted me to there being a problem. Otherwise, I don't know when we would have noticed.
I wondered that. I guess it's when we go to put up this part, and I'd be like, wait, where's part 1? Oh, shit.
So if you're joining us for this one, would recommend going back and listening to part 1, if you haven't. Mm-hmm. But, live your life. I'm not your mother.
You can do you.
I'm not your mother.
If you want to commit to this one, we are the Generally Spooky Podcast. We do a deep dive into Scottish history and its spooky stories.
It's great.
And and we have a good time doing it.
It's great.
But yes, jumping to part 1 is probably recommended. Oh, shall we roll some music and dive in?
Yeah, I think we should. I have a lot I want to tell you, so yeah.
Let's dive in. We can take our pause that we always take.
Mm-hmm. Even though the music doesn't play when we record, it goes in post. We still pause anyway. Odin is joining us. He is sound asleep on the floor, but he may leave in the middle if he starts, voraciously being himself.
Unapologetically him.
Yeah.
Chaos machine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I left you in the loving arms of the early 1500s when last we spoke.
Yes, you did. that's where we'd left off, eagerly anticipating somebody who was about to do something. But I'll be honest, I've forgotten.
I mean, that was a very diplomatic way of saying it, because I knew you had no idea, but you covered all of your bases. I saw the look on your face and I saw the panic, and I knew you were talking shit. But you did it so well.
Thank you. I covered it up nicely, I think.
Yes. Well, we were just talking about James III, King James III. That's where we were in Scottish history, and how his brother Alexander, he was the one who raided Lochmaben Fair. I'm doing it.
Yeah.
He was the one who raided Lochmaben Fair because he wanted to be king. But he was imprisoned in Edinburgh Castle for a while. And so was James III for the period of time when Alexander had power.
Yes.
We were talking a little bit about that and how James III had the Crown Square built in the style of an Italian piazza. So he was taking style inspo from the European monarchs and adding to Edinburgh Castle to make it more of a cultural hub and kind of signalling to other monarchs that this was a place of power.
Yep.
And learning. That's where we were.
Absolutely.
Why are you laughing?
Oh, I was just thinking about that bit in Step Brothers when...
This is a home of learned doctors.
Yeah. This is where the learned kings hang out.
It was a big deal. Like, you had to indicate that you were hip and trendy, otherwise you would be dismissed.
Yeah, otherwise you'll get the bad seat at the king's ball.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
I'm pretty sure that's written down in, like, the annals of history somewhere.
You think so?
That's what, yeah, I think so.
That specifically?
I'm pretty sure I've come across that.
What's exciting, since the last time we spoke, we've been to Edinburgh Castle.
We have, so we may interject with some more personal material since we have been there. We had a great time.
Yes, we did.
I posted some photos on Instagram, if you're interested. If you're not, that's fine. We're going to talk to you about it now. But I left off last episode teasing that I was about to tell you about a very interesting character that I came across in my research.
Absolutely.
I'm pretty sure that's where we left it.
See, just what I said. There's someone about to do something, you know?
Yep, me.
It's always you.
In my research on the early 1500s in Edinburgh Castle, that's how I've had to attack this beast chronologically.
Year by year.
I came across a woman called Ellen More. Have you heard of Ellen More?
No, but I'd love to hear more.
Guys, this is free. This is free. Chances are, if you're listening, you probably haven't heard of Ellen More either, which is why I want to bring her up. Because Ellen More was an African servant who worked in Edinburgh Castle in the 1500s.
Cool.
She served one of James IV's daughters. So this was interesting to me because I always had when I think of the slave trade, I think of it happening later than 1500.
Yeah, that's true.
So it surprised me. It may just be showing my ignorance on the subject, which I'm trying to remedy. But it struck me as quite unusual that there were African servants working in Edinburgh Castle in the 1500s.
Yeah.
So I looked into it. When I say she worked in Edinburgh Castle, please don't be under any illusion that she woke up one morning in, I think there's documents that describe her as being Ethiopian. Please don't think that she woke up in Ethiopia one morning and decided she would love to be an indentured servant to white royals in Scotland. Ellen More wasn't even her name. She was given this name when she arrived in the UK.
Well, yeah.
And her name that she was born with doesn't exist.
Oh.
It's not written down anywhere.
Yeah. She didn't just decide she wanted to go to a hub of cultured learning.
Well, I mean, hub of cultured learning is very much in quotation marks there, because I doubt the hubs of culture and learning that she was exposed to were treated very highly.
No.
But Ellen More, she was given this name when she came to the UK. It isn't clear, but from what I read, it seems like Ellen was brought over to Scotland by Scottish privateers who clashed with Portuguese ships.
Okay.
In and around Spain, Portugal, along with her sister, who was called Margaret. Now, obviously, she was named Margaret.
Yes.
But these are the only records that exist for these women.
Yes.
It's a bit complicated to get into the relations between Portugal and Scotland at this time. Basically, these Scottish privateers were given permission by King James to interfere with Portuguese shipping.
Okay.
He wanted that to happen. And that's basically all you need to know over this.
Cool.
And that seems to be how Ellen and Margaret were brought over. This was it was a roundabout way that exotic animals, like monkeys and animals from the continent of Africa, were brought to the UK and to Scotland. But unfortunately, also people who were treated as cargo. So I think this is why it's happening earlier than the slave trade as we understand it.
Yes.
Which I think is why it's important to know about, because this shit was happening a long time before, like, 1700s, 1800s.
Yep, absolutely.
When you might... that's generally where your mind goes to, I think.
That's where mine went to. Because somebody in Stirling Castle had a lion, didn't they?
Yes. There was a courtyard where a lion was kept.
Yep. Thinking of exotic animals.
And we talked about a ghost lion when we did one of our extra episodes.
Oh, yeah.
Over on Patreon. So if you want to hear about a ghost lion, head on over there. It's a cracking story. Unfortunately, the people in charge of these ships who were bringing over the exotic cargo treated African people much the same way as the rest of their cargo, because in their minds there was no difference.
Yep.
And weirdly, you have this attitude existing where they are treated like things, not people. But having servants, like black servants who are from Africa, became a weird status symbol in European royal courts.
Yeah?
Or aristocratic homes around this time.
Oh, that's weird.
So like portraits exist of royals who have African servants in the portrait with them. They were often displayed and paraded around the court. It was a status symbol.
Oh, God.
Even though they weren't treated as people.
No. They were still lesser.
But in these same courts, it was also a status symbol to have exotic animals in much the same way.
Yeah. Oh, God, that's weird, isn't it?
It's awful.
Ooh, horrible.
Ellen More is mentioned for the first time, I think, in royal records in 1511. And she's mentioned for the last time in 1527.
Okay.
So she was in service to them for quite a long time. And like I said earlier, she's described as being Ethiopian, but all of the African servants mentioned in these records are described as Ethiopian.
Oh, I see. So they're not necessarily from Ethiopia.
No. And obviously country borders change over time. But I feel like they were just kind of ignorant to the different tribe systems and countries in Africa.
Yep.
So they're all Ethiopian. So I say that, but it might not be right.
Got you.
During her service, you can see in the records that she was given lots of dresses and shoes to wear. And they were important enough that they're accounted for in the palace records. And she was given gifts at New Year from people in the palace.
Oh, that's nice, I guess.
And I read that being gifted fine clothes, like the ones she was given, that are listed, and the shoes, that was better received by servants than money.
Oh, yeah?
Because they were more valuable.
Oh.
Because of the work and the time that goes into these dresses and these clothes.
Oh, I see.
They're worth more than just getting the money.
Interesting.
So these would be very grand gifts, is what I'm trying to say. Which doesn't make up for,
freedom would be nice, wouldn't
the
it?
servitude and being ripped from your home. But it's interesting that these things have been recorded.
Yeah, absolutely. She was obviously better looked after than she might have been.
I think in their weird way they did care about her.
Yes.
But I can't help thinking it must have been in the way you love a pet or a child. I feel like she wouldn't have been given the respect that she deserved.
No, it wasn't as an equal. But then to kings, no one was an equal at the same time, I guess.
Well, yeah, they were bad to everybody.
Yep.
This is just especially terrible.
Yeah.
As you would expect, Ellen More was subject to an enormous amount of just racism. from everybody.
Yep.
For example, there are records showing that she performed in what were called Black Lady tournaments.
Oh,
And
no.
they were kind of set up like a play. So she played a black woman because she was one.
Yep.
And it was kind of a pretend but real jousting tournament.
Okay.
And she was the prize for the winning knight in the tournament. I was like winning the lady.
Oh.
But the whole thing with her being the prize in this tournament was that she wasn't a white woman.
Yes.
And that was the joke.
What?
Yeah.
Oh. That's horrible.
So like you're going after this prize, but they don't see her as like a thing of beauty because she's a black woman.
It's the booby prize.
And it's really weird that just the whole thing is like a skit.
Yeah, that's bizarre. I mean, my first thought was they got all the black servants and just sort of threw them in a fighting pit.
No, I'm not saying that didn't happen throughout history.
Oh, yeah.
Just in this particular instance, that's not what it was. It was more... It was more insidious than that.
Yeah.
Because she's included, but not really. They like her, but not really. You know?
Absolutely. Well, she gets to take part, but she's the joke.
So then it's not taking part.
No.
It's icky.
They need her as the punchline.
And it's
almost.
awful.
Oh, it's really awful.
And she wouldn't actually be given away as part of these tournaments. She was the prize, but like it was the joke of the thing. She wouldn't be given to a different family to serve them.
Yeah.
She stayed where she was. So that's Ellen and the time that she spent at Edinburgh Castle.
Wow. That's wild. 1500.
In the 1500s, early 1500s. And she served a few different families, but it's interesting, she spent time at Edinburgh Castle serving the royals who were living there.
That's an entire thing I didn't know existed.
That's why I wanted to share it. I know it's only a little snippet because the records are patchy, but, you know, these stories deserve to be heard.
Absolutely. I'm surprised there's any records, to be honest, beyond, like, in paintings, since it was a status symbol.
A lot of the sources I saw felt the same way that she's mentioned.
You wonder how many other, quote, Ethiopians there were in service.
Well, it seems like they were a lot. Because this was a thing.
Weird.
I want to look into it more.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I want to mention her in this episode. So that's Ellen.
That's Ellen.
In 1507, so we're kind of back a little bit, the very first fireworks display in Scotland happened at Edinburgh Castle.
1507.
1507.
God damn. That I would have thought that's too early for fireworks.
Right?
Like, you could have told me fireworks were invented 50 years ago, and I would have believed you.
No, 1507. It was far earlier in China, I think.
Really?
I think so, yeah. I
Wow.
think that's where they were invented.
That makes sense.
I can look into it for the blether, but I'm fairly sure, because they were far more advanced in lots of different things than we were back in 1507. James IV held a big jousting tournament, and because he wanted to flex, he had fireworks set off for the event in 1507. And I know you think this is early, but he was actually pipped to the post by King Henry VII in England.
Oh, yeah?
He had set fireworks off in 1486,
Oh, by a lot, too.
which is 21 years earlier, and he did this for his wedding.
Wow. I mean, that's even earlier than I thought that would have been possible. I bet James thought he was so original, too. Oh, I'm going to do fireworks. This has never been done before.
I don't know if he would have been under any illusions that it hadn't been done. But he is now at that level
Yeah.
where he's set off fireworks at a royal event.
Well, because fireworks are expensive, like, today.
Yeah.
How expensive were they in 1507?
And thankfully, they were set off on purpose, so nothing just exploded.
Well, that's good.
It wasn't a disaster. It was actually a nice thing.
You know, do they just fire their cannons vertically?
I'm not sure, because it said that they made the fireworks themselves. So they weren't like imported or anything. So I'm not sure. I would need to look into it.
Oh, who was the chief firework maker? The alchemist, probably. But
Wild, eh?
crazy.
What I want to know is how people reacted in Edinburgh to these fireworks going off at the castle.
God damn.
Because it would be so loud.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't be used to that unless, you've been exposed to like, battle and cannon fire.
Yes.
You wouldn't hear things like that typically.
Well, you might just panic and think the cannons are going off.
Like
Run
lights in the sky.
Run inside and hide.
I would love to know what people in Edinburgh thought.
Absolutely. I'd love to know what they looked like as well. Were they different colours? Did they have that
I would
figured out?
imagine colours would be doable, just by experimentation. But they certainly don't have a backing track and a synchronised schedule for them all to go off on.
They're not set to music.
No, Katy Perry isn't playing in the background.
I thought Katy Perry. It's always Katy Perry.
That's because she has a song called Firework.
Yeah. As soon as I said it, I'm like, oh, I know the answer to that.
James IV was considered a pretty good king, all in.
Good.
He had the Great Hall of Edinburgh Castle built in 1512, which we went to go see.
Yes, we did.
It has a really interesting ceiling, which I told Kieran about and annoyed him with the whole time we were there.
I got my own private tour of the castle. It was great.
The Great Hall has a medieval hammer beam roof. And if you go to see it, I'll try and post photos somewhere. It's all wooden. And it's like a big vaulted ceiling. It's beautiful. It's all painted. The oak beams that were used to build the ceiling were shipped over from Norway when the Great Hall was built. A very big deal because this would have been very, very costly. Mm-hmm. And you can still see the original beams from 1512. They were rediscovered during renovations, which we'll get into later. Because this happened, I say recently, but within the past 200 years. They rediscovered all of these beams. And scientists were able to learn that the trees used to make these beams were cut down in 1510.
Damn.
They could date it that precisely. So they knew these were cut down specifically to make these beams.
That's wild. They're big too. Those must have been big trees.
Yeah. Big oak trees.
It's really cool. It looks like a boat's keel.
Yes, it does.
If you've ever seen that. If you can imagine, like, where people rowing would sit in a boat. That kind of shape. Looks like that. Or like the roof in where the Vikings would sit in Valhalla.
A big longhouse.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It's got that vibe to it. It's very cool.
And they've restored and redone all of the paintwork on the beams. Do you remember?
I don't remember the paintwork.
It was all like red and gold over the beams going from one side to the other.
Oh.
Very pretty.
Very pretty.
Yeah, 1510. They dated the wood.
1510. That's cool. That's some old wood.
Right. So the Great Hall was built in 1512. But James IV died at Flodden the following year.
Oh, yes.
1513. We've talked about that a lot before. I would say it deserves its own episode, but is there even any point anymore?
Yeah, have we already covered it at this point?
Just over like 20 episodes. After the defeat of the Scots in 1513, they were really, really worried that the English would pursue them further north after their victory and try to gain more victories while the army was in a weakened state.
A valid worry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially because they took out so many important people at Flodden.
They did. A lot of dead nobility. Mm-hmm. And a dead king. And a dead king, which is always a vulnerable position.
Yep.
So a wall was built around Edinburgh to keep possible invaders out. Mm. We've talked about it before in our Greyfriars Kirkyard episode.
Yep.
Can you remember what it was called?
That is the Flodden Wall.
Hey, you figured it out. You didn't remember, but you got logic working for you.
I was going to say Cattlegate. I'm like, well, that could be in the wall, but it's not the wall.
No, it's the Flodden Wall. A very, very famous wall. Parts of it are still standing across Edinburgh.
Such as in Greyfriars Kirkyard.
Yes, you can see part of it there. The wall wasn't finished until 1560. So it's a very good thing that the English didn't come around trying to invade Edinburgh.
1560? Mm-hmm. Like 47 years later?
Yes.
That's
fast math.
Thank you. That's not useful.
It's not the most practical.
Why do they bother finishing it?
I mean, you've put that much time in. It'd just be embarrassing if you didn't finish it.
If you've got half a wall.
You know? Mm. Yeah, that's how long it took. I bring up the Flodden Wall and the death of King James IV because we are now in the reign of James V. who became king after his father's death.
Good old Jimbo.
And now that we're into the reign of James V and onwards, we are in the era of witch trials.
Ah, yes.
Which we have talked about before.
Yep.
We've talked a lot about the castle itself up until now, but Castle Hill, which is the slope leading up to the castle on the east side, was just as infamous, because this was where lots and lots and lots of executions happened.
Ah.
And a lot of these were witchcraft, or people executed for committing witchcraft under James V and later James VI, blah, blah, blah. It was pretty common for witches to be burned on Castle Hill. It was a popular place. Janet Douglas was one of these people.
Okay.
Also known as Lady Glams.
Oh, yes.
Who was accused of trying to kill her husband, and she was murdered so that King James V could benefit politically. She was burned at the stake right in front of the castle in 1537.
Wow. Right in front of the castle.
Oh, well, on Castle Hill, you could see the castle. It was right there. Because now there's the Esplanade, which is the big... you know where the tattoo happens outside the castle? You can walk up.
Oh, yeah.
That wasn't there during this period. It was just rocky, wild growth outside the castle.
That's a funny thought.
But this was Castle Hill, and this was where the executions happened.
Ah, yes. Quick sidebar on Castle Hill. We once again walked up it. So exhausting.
Yeah.
Such a big hill to walk to the top of to get to the castle.
And it was roasting without being burned at the stake.
Exactly. No flames were happening. Just on the back of my neck as I sunburned.
And under my feet.
Yes.
Much later, in 1591, John Fian, Fian,
Finn?
he was executed on Castle Hill for witchcraft too. He was accused as part of the North Berwick witch trials.
Oh, yes.
And was tortured for his confession. We've gotten to this lovely part of history now. I don't think we mentioned him in the North Berwick episode.
Couldn't say.
Because we covered an awful lot.
Yeah.
He was one of the ones accused and executed. But he had been a teacher.
A teacher?
He was a teacher. And he recanted all of his confessions before his death, saying that he said it because he believed that they wouldn't kill him if he confessed, even though it wasn't true. But nobody listened.
It's just so awful.
They're always so sad.
Every time we get to witch trials, it's just awful. Everyone got done so dirty.
So I'm not going to talk about them at length because we've done it before. And there are so many. It would be its own episode because that's what they deserve.
Yep.
But I wanted to just let you know that we're in that period now. And this is happening outside Edinburgh Castle a lot.
Oh, well, see... Oh, no, I was going to say maybe the fireworks would be a relief because it would cover up all the screams of everyone being murdered. But the dates don't match up, so never mind.
Not quite. And all of the torture was happening in the prisons and vaults under the castle. So no one hears you through all that stone. Always so sad. If you visit Edinburgh Castle, I say today, but they're setting up for the tattoo, so I don't know if you can actually get to it at the moment. But there's the Witch's Well outside the castle, which is a memorial for all of those who were executed as witches there, since they don't have proper graves and markers, most of them. So you can go and visit the Witch's Well, if that's something that means a lot to you.
Is it so you can wish them well? Wishing well.
Witch's Well.
Yeah, but you hear well, you think wishing.
Oh.
No.
I mean, it would be nice.
Maybe that's where that saying comes from.
Maybe. I don't think so, but maybe.
Can't make any of those many wrongful deaths better, but, you know...
Kieran's doing the good man's work.
Yeah.
As well as for people accused of being witches, execution at Edinburgh Castle might be organised for the people who were well known, the wealthy, the important, and just the infamous. If a case or crime was particularly important or shocking, then justice might be carried out at Edinburgh Castle, so it could be seen to be done.
Yes. Now, I think I always get this wrong, but if they were noble, then they got their heads chopped off.
Usually, yes.
Yes.
It was seen as a more dignified death than hanging, which was also typical.
Yep. I mean, it would be a bit, I suppose.
And being burned at the stake was usually reserved for witches. Hanging was fairly typical. But yes, if you had lots of money and you were a noble, usually you would have your head chopped off. And some of the time, before prisoners would be executed, they weren't always held at the castle and the prisons there. They might be held at the toll booth in Edinburgh.
Oh yeah, which is kind of further down Castle Hill, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's fairly close to the castle. You walk past it on your way up to the castle. But it's an episode to itself. It has its own grisly history.
Yeah.
So they weren't always kept in the castle itself.
No, it's quite funny walking around Edinburgh with Eilidh as we were to and froing and doing tourist stuff. Pert's been like, oh, someone died here. Oh, yeah, people died over there too. Is it? Yep, that's where they used to murder people. Like, oh, that was a horrible place down there. And I'm beside her, she's been like, can we just have a nice time for a bit?
Yeah, I was having a nice time.
You were having a nice time. Getting down and dirty in the depths of history.
Yeah, I wasn't getting down or dirty anywhere. Thank you. I'll have you know.
Perhaps the wrong choice of phrase.
It's just interesting for me because I do a lot of research. So it's quite nice getting to go down there. Like, oh, I know this place. I've read about this place. It came up. But history is rarely, good times and rainbows. So...
no matter how many wishes you put in the well.
Yeah. This is reality, Kieran.
It is. The other reality was like, oh, remember I talked about this place? Oh, what about that we mentioned? Yeah.
It is a bit trying going places with you sometimes.
It's just a bit trying when I'm involved generally.
It's a bit demoralising.
Generally trying.
I need to put more effort into making my episodes memorable. Once you start remembering them, I know I've got it made.
We'll see how we go.
So yes, executions galore at Edinburgh Castle. And apologies if it feels like we're bouncing around a lot, but I'm trying to follow the timeline of the castle, so it feels a little disjointed to me, but maybe not to you.
I don't think so.
Now we're going to talk about the honours of Scotland.
Okay.
In 1543, James IV and James V after him had the complete honours of Scotland in their possession.
What's that?
They were the new Scottish crown jewels.
Oh, okay.
So by 1543, the two of them had worked on having these things made. By 1543, they had the complete collection.
Very cool.
We talked about it last episode, but King Edward had lifted the originals 300 years before. I think they were supposed to be returned. I don't know if those old ones were used to make new ones.
Maybe.
I'm not sure. But these are now different crown jewels to the ones that he took. So firstly, James IV was given the sceptre in 1494 by Pope Alexander VI.
Very good.
And in classic man fashion, he had it lengthened. He needed it to be much longer. As long as possible. As long as he could carry. That's what he needed.
Disappointed by his stubby wee staff, was he?
To really be king, he needed the longest sceptre of anyone.
Well, if you're not wielding a big, long sceptre, are you even a man? So,
and he needed everyone to know about it. That it's the longest.
He had a point to prove.
He did. But not that his sceptre wasn't long.
No, he got that covered.
Good boy. Odin has resumed his perch under Kieran's desk.
Yep, that's where he likes to hang out.
It's like a little den.
I was about to say, a little den with my feet.
Then James IV was given the Sword of State by Pope Julius II in 1507.
How was its length? Plenty?
It seems alright. He didn't have to, change anything.
Okay.
So it seems like it was acceptable.
He didn't have to get some sort of sword pump to make it bigger?
No, I think his wife was happy.
Okay, good.
So he just left it.
Yeah.
It was made in Italy, and we saw it when we went to Edinburgh Castle. It is very grand. The workmanship of it is quite incredible.
Yes.
The detailing in the hilt and even the scabbard is beautiful. So then in 1540, which is closer to where we just were in the timeline,
yes,
James V received the crown, which was made in Edinburgh. And John Mosman was a goldsmith in Edinburgh. He was commissioned to design and make this new crown. And he melted down the old crown to make this new one.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I do wonder if they had them returned, but they've just been repurposed.
Yeah.
And I read that he used Scottish gold to make it.
Oh.
And that made me think how much I would love to have a piece of jewellery that was Scottish gold. And then I came across a little tidbit that only 2 jewellers are allowed to make jewellery with Scottish gold. They're the only 2 licensed.
That's really cool. I didn't know there was any Scottish gold.
It is mined outside Tyndrum. We've driven past the mine before.
The gold mine.
Mm-hmm. How cool is that?
That's really cool.
I would love a piece of Scottish gold jewellery. That would mean a huge deal to me.
So there can't be very much of it being mined.
No, there isn't a lot of it to go around. Mm-hmm. I think that's why it's kind of being rationed that way.
Yeah. I wonder where it all goes. Because it won't all, presumably not all the gold goes straight to these 2 jewellers.
No, I wouldn't have thought so. One of the jewellers is Sheila Fleet, who's based up in Orkney, and her jewellery's beautiful.
Her stuff is really nice.
She makes, I can't remember, I didn't come across the name of the other jeweller, but if I do, I will share them. But yeah, I might have that like bucket list purchase one day.
Yeah, a bit of Scottish gold jewellery. Be pretty smart.
If I had known, and if we had more money when we were 20, I might have wanted a Scottish gold wedding ring.
I was just thinking that. That would be cool.
But I don't think we could have afforded that.
Probably not. Wouldn't it be weird if it's the Scottish gold goes to these 2 jewellers and the rest just goes to Apple to make iPhones? That would be so sad.
And I would be really mad about it.
Yeah, because there's a lot of gold in technology, I think. It'd be a damn shame, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. It's probably too expensive for that. When you can get cheaper gold.
You can probably get cheaper gold.
Since there's not a lot of Scottish gold, I feel like it would be more expensive. Anyway, I thought you'd want to know.
Yes.
So in 1540, New Crown, the honours of Scotland were the symbols of the Scottish monarch's power. So it was decided that they would be kept in the treasury of Edinburgh Castle to keep them safe.
As good a place as any?
Well, it didn't work the first time.
No.
But, they have to do something.
But they're 30 years into building a wall that's not finished, so...
So, they're set.
Yeah. They'll get that done any day now, and then they'll be safe again.
It's like a typical contractor, eh?
And, the treasury's probably pretty deep into the castle to keep it safe, as the prisons are also pretty deep into the castle to keep them out. That can't go wrong. Keeping your treasure and your prisoners in the same place.
Well, I don't think they were kept in the same place, because we've seen the room that they're kept in now, and I'm pretty sure that's where they've always been kept.
Okay.
So it's within the heart of the castle, but it's not deep underground.
Nope, it's high up.
But easily defended, because if you remember, we went up a spiral staircase.
We did.
To get to them. So if the castle was being attacked, that's a far better place to defend than somewhere with big doors.
That's true. And then there was one big-ass door to get into the room they were displayed in.
Yeah, today it's a vault.
Well, I was laughing because you've got this huge, big, steel door that's bolted open because they don't want it swinging shut and crushing somebody. So it's bolted into the opposite wall. And
it does close, though.
I just thought that was really funny. You could probably unbolt it, but I just that they have this defensive room.
It's like having a fire exit locked.
Yeah.
Oh, it's too windy. James V was married in 1540, and I think that's why his new crown was made, making the new full set. His wife was Mary of Guise, and she had one made too.
Oh, very cool.
Because she became Queen of Scotland. 30 cannons were fired from the castle to mark their wedding in 1540.
God damn.
And they were all fired from David's Tower in the middle of the castle.
Cool. Were they loaded?
Yes, they didn't have blanks, I don't believe.
Oh, no. Duck.
And there were more fireworks.
Ah, very nice, very nice. There's a tradition now.
So now we're in 1558. I'm jumping ahead.
It's no longer raining cannonballs.
No. I mean, we'll see. James V died 4 years ago.
Yes.
In 1554. At the Battle of Solway Moss against the English.
Yep.
Henry VIII is currently King of England. And he's broken with the Catholic Church by this point. So he's having his tantrum and whatever else. killing his wives. The heir to the throne, Mary, is in France. While her mother, Mary of Guise, who I just talked about,
Oh, yes.
she's ruling Scotland on young Mary's behalf because she's still very young.
I, of course, remembered that was her mum and her daughter.
I mean, yeah, obviously.
Obviously.
Mary's in France because it's not safe for her to be in Scotland right now. Henry was doing everything he could to force her into a marriage with his son.
Yep.
We have a whole episode about this if you're interested. We have a Mary Queen of Scots episode because it's quite an epic. That's what's happening. In 1558, Mary married Francis, the Dauphin of France. She was the heir to the French throne. And to celebrate the marriage of the Queen of Scotland in Scotland, Mons Meg was fired from Edinburgh Castle.
Very good.
A very grand and loud tribute to her.
Absolutely.
While she's still over in France.
We saw Mons Meg while we were at the castle.
We did.
It's big.
It's very big.
But it's much like stubbier than I expected. I expected a super long cannon
Most men do, don't they?
to have this sort of like range to be able to fire 2 miles, but it's more girthy, chodular, if you will.
My nose is wrinkled. It's not coming down now.
Ailey will not, but if you will at home, that's a more apt description.
Now, it's interesting that you raised the problem of whether they were firing like actual cannonballs. Because when they fired Mons Meg for Mary's wedding, they found the cannonball from this firing
Oh yeah.
in what is now the Royal Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh,
Oh no.
which is 1.5 miles away from Edinburgh Castle.
How can you just... That's why you don't have health and safety. That's how you can just fire a cannon out and hope it doesn't hit anybody.
They found it there.
Oh my god. They could even have aimed it at the sea.
Well,
think.
I believe there weren't houses on this bit of land then. I think it was it Wardy Muir? It was known as then because Botanic Gardens came later. But yeah, they just fired a cannonball into Edinburgh.
You're just minding your business below the castle, and you just hear this eruption as Mons Meg's fired over your head.
And then your legs are just blown off.
Well, I wasn't even meaning if you're hit by it, just if you're nearby. You might never hear again.
Yep, they did that.
Goddamn.
As I said, Mary of Guise had been ruling on Mary's behalf.
Yes.
Mary, Queen of Scots, is Mary of Guise's daughter.
Yes.
While she was away. But this all ended when Mary of Guise died in 1560, when she was 45. Now, Mary of Guise is an interesting character who I feel like we could have an episode on.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember how in-depth we went in our Mary, Queen of Scots episode, but Mary of Guise was a tough cookie.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, she was a bit of a badass.
I remember her putting up with a lot of shit.
Yeah, she did. She really did. Before she married James, she turned down a marriage offer from Henry VIII.
Ah, yes.
He asked to marry her. Henry had said he was, quote, big in person and had need of a big wife, unquote. Which Mary of Guise found out about. Like, he didn't say it to her, but she found out he was saying, he was talking shit. And she answered, I may be a big woman, but I have very little neck.
To chop off. Oh, nice.
In reference to Henry executing Anne Boleyn, because apparently she had made a similar comment at her execution. Basically something along the lines of, you'll find it easy to kill me because I only have a little neck. So Henry's reputation had gotten round and Mary of Guise was like, fuck no, I'm not doing that.
Well, yeah. I'm impressed she was able to say no. I kind of assumed if the king asked to marry somebody, it happened.
Well, I think she'd been married before. This wasn't her first marriage. And I think it was the political climate at the time because France and England weren't really getting on. So she had allies she could turn to because she didn't want to marry the King of England. And there would be other people who would support that.
Yep.
So she went on to marry James V of Scotland.
It's good work.
And her daughter married the Prince of France. You see?
Yep, I see what happened.
And considering Henry VIII would go on to execute one of his other wives, she made the right call.
She made a good call. A good call.
She was also up against people like John Knox during her regency. and he wrote it's kind of like a book or an extended essay called "The First Blast of the Trumpet Against the Monstrous Regiment of Women," which I think might be where Terry Pratchett got his name for Monstrous Regiment, his book.
Oh, yeah.
Because in this essay, he basically detailed how having a female monarch went against the Bible.
Oh, there's always one, isn't there?
Absolute shithead.
And by always one, I mean there's always tens of hundreds.
That was a man.
It's always some man waggling his Bible.
But he was a very famous preacher, but he hated that Mary of Guise was queen or regent because he felt that having a having a woman in charge went against the teachings of the Bible, and it was evil.
What a dick.
So she's dealing with that shit. At the time of her death in 1560, tensions were really high between Scotland, England and France. Diplomats and various other important people who needed to negotiate between countries weren't allowed to travel between them.
Okay.
Things were that bad. They had to get permission from the country they were wanting to go to, and more often than not, the requests were refused.
Yeast.
Completely. So, travel's not great. Mary died of dropsy, which is now known as edema, or fluid retention.
Okay.
So, fluid gathers in like your limbs or your legs, and it can be caused by more serious health problems like heart failure.
Oh, okay.
But it was called dropsy then. And she wrote letters and she talks about having bad mobility, and there are lots of hints that she had edema. She died on the 11th of June, 1560. She lay in state in St Margaret's Chapel, which we went to. It's the oldest part of Edinburgh Castle, a very sacred and important place, so she was the regent. She was lying in state there. However, Mary of Guise wanted to be buried in France.
Oh.
At the time when no one was allowed to travel.
Tricky.
Mary's body wasn't taken to France until March 1561.
How long was that?
Almost a year later.
Ooh.
Because no one would let them take her body to France to be buried.
That's not going to be a pretty sight.
And I read that her body actually had to be smuggled out of the castle. So even the time it did finally leave, strictly speaking, it wasn't allowed. Because I think it was England in the middle, kicking up a fuss, being like, nope, can't do it. We're not going to let you through.
Wild.
So they had to smuggle her through.
Oh, that's just... Then my nose is crinkled.
But this is something we're going to come back to later.
Oh, put a historically spooky pin in that.
Just a spooky pin.
Oh, I can do that. I can do that.
So obviously with Mary of Guise dying and her body finally leaving in 1561, this was when Mary, Queen of Scots, came back to rule.
Well, she must have had a time coming back to Scotland.
Well, yeah, she had to be smuggled in the same way her mother was smuggled out.
Yeast.
She was smuggled into Edinburgh Castle, apparently before her official grand entrance to the castle. Her and her advisors spent the evening there, they had dinner, without anyone knowing that she had arrived. And then the next day, they had the big procession of the Queen coming back to the castle through Edinburgh.
That's so funny.
And lots of fanfare, guns firing, everything you would expect.
Yeah.
That happened the following day.
Nice.
I guess just to make sure she made it safely.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And then to just, like, make preparations with her, not just for her.
Yeah, I guess, or just to catch her up to speed,
yeah.
Maybe. Mary's tenure at Edinburgh Castle, along with her son James VI, were some of the most dramatic, which we're going to talk about today. This is the bulk of the episode, because this is when the most happened.
Was that pun intended? Which we're going to talk about?
No, that wasn't intended, actually. Mary had a bumpy reign, to say the least.
Yes, I remember that much from her episode.
Yes, lots of conflict and fighting. She faced a lot of drama from her advisors.
Drama.
Her family, other important Scottish nobles. She was never able to please everybody, which is always the way. And she had a difficult time because of it. She gave birth to James VI in Edinburgh Castle in 1566, which was kind of unusual because she spent a lot of time at the Palace of Holyrood House.
Oh, yeah.
Which we've talked about before. It's at the other end of the Royal Mile. We talked about it in our King David episode.
Yes.
It was far more luxurious and comfortable than the castle, which was primarily for battle and fortification.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Unless you're under siege, why would you go into the castle? Or working?
Well, because the palace was just more comfy.
Yeah.
And just nicer. But Edinburgh Castle was very safe. Big, thick walls, lots of guns. Remember, this is where the country's arsenal was.
Yep.
We talked about that last episode. So this was valued more than comfort for her giving birth to the heir.
Well, that's true.
So that there was no funny business. She was safe. And there was kind of the symbolism of the whole thing. That he's been born in Edinburgh Castle, this seat of power.
Yep.
Which I've mentioned multiple times now.
As a thought, the Holyrood Palace is on the other side of the Flodden Wall, isn't it? It's on the outside of the wall.
I'm not sure. I
think.
I would need to see where the wall used to be.
Yeah.
Maybe, but the palace had been there for quite a long time. I would need to check. I don't know that off the top of my head.
Just a strange thought.
But Edinburgh Castle was safer. It's in a more easily defendable spot. You know, because it's on Castle Rock and everything. Now, despite giving birth to, a brand spanking new male heir to the throne of Scotland, all wasn't well for Mary. She was facing a lot of enemies, and because of her religious beliefs and her choices, which you can listen to the episode to find out more about, lots of people felt that she should give up the throne to her new son, who could be raised in the Protestant faith rather than the Catholic one which she held.
Yes.
And which she seemed to favour, which people didn't like.
Because that will obviously make a massive difference into her competency as queen.
Yeah, they weren't for it.
Yep.
They didn't want a Catholic monarch. And she wouldn't change.
Yep.
And I'm not saying she should have. That was the issue.
It's what happened.
She was forced to abdicate in 1567. Things became untenable. She was defeated. So her son, James, he was only like a year old at the time. She was captured and imprisoned, but she escaped to Dumbarton Castle in 1568. And this was where she basically claimed that she should have the throne back from her son because she had been forced to give it up under duress, and she didn't want to do that.
And because her son is 1 year old.
Yes, but he has an awful lot of support.
Yeah.
So it's less about him as a person.
No.
And who his allies are. But yeah, she claimed that because this had been gained unlawfully, she should be made queen again. And all of this culminated in the Battle of Langside, which Mary dramatically lost. She lost over 100 men in this battle. Would you like to take a guess at how many of the king's men were lost?
7.
No.
I'm assuming it's less. So, like 20?
1.
1 loss.
1.
Oh, that's not a good ratio.
No.
You sacrificed 100 of your men for 1 of their men.
And you were captured at the end of it.
Yep.
So not good for Mary.
Not good.
It was after this that she rode into England, and she never came back to Scotland after this. Again, consult the episode for more. In her absence, the people who still supported her were still fighting for her to become queen again. They hadn't given up, but she had to leave. James Stuart, the first Earl of Murray, was made regent of Scotland after Mary left.
Yep.
So he's ruling on behalf of James VI. He's one of the king's men.
Totally selflessly, I'm sure.
I feel like if this is the James Stuart I'm thinking of, he might have been Mary's half-brother.
Oh.
I feel like I have that right. He took charge of Edinburgh Castle. He managed to take it from James Balfour, who was one of Mary's men. He had managed to take the castle back from him. With me?
Wait, are they not on the same side?
No, they aren't. So Murray went up against James Balfour to take Edinburgh Castle back.
Oh, yes, I see.
on behalf of the king.
Yep.
And when Murray got the castle, he made Sir William Kirkcaldy of Grange the keeper of Edinburgh Castle. Grange was one of Murray's biggest supporters, so he felt that he could trust him with the castle. And Grange was also the provost of Edinburgh, so he was an important guy.
Very good.
Murray was murdered in 1570.
Oh, no.
And that made Grange think about some things. Things like, am I on the right side of this?
Yeah.
Because if I get this wrong, somebody might kill me.
Ugh.
So he decided he would take some time to really think this issue over. By 1571, it looked like Mary's side were doing pretty well
Oh, yes.
in the battle for the Scottish throne. So Grange decided that he would be on their side now.
Yeah, okay.
So he was now Mary's man on the inside of Edinburgh Castle.
Ah.
And we've talked about how difficult it is to take the castle back from someone you don't want to have it.
Yep.
So Grange, by doing this, he turned on the king's men. Edinburgh Castle is now the holdout of Mary's forces. And his doing this started the Lang siege.
Okay.
And after Murray died, Matthew Stewart, the 4th Earl of Lennox, was made the regent. And he was pissed at what Grange had done.
Well, you would be. You would be. But I would want to siege a castle that has Mons Meg on the inside.
Right.
You know?
So this is a big, big deal.
Yep.
He's flipped Edinburgh Castle for the Queen. And Lennox isn't happy about it. Particularly because Lennox was Lord Darnley's father, who is widely considered to have been murdered as part of a plot by Queen Mary.
Well,
He was her husband.
he's got a bone to pick.
Because he was exploded.
Oh, he blew up in his house.
Yeah.
Yes.
But when they examined his body, he hadn't been exploded at all. So Lennox is not her biggest fan.
No.
And wanted to ensure that his grandson remained king, because James was Darnley's son.
Yes. Yes.
With me?
I'm with you.
So Lennox was leading forces to take back Edinburgh from Mary's supporters. And they formed a base out in Leith, since this is a time before Edinburgh was so big that Leith became part of Edinburgh.
Oh, yeah.
It's not as big as it is today. And I saw some sources that referred to this as the war between Edinburgh and Leith.
Oh, cool. It's so funny because it's all Edinburgh now.
Well, we walked that
Yeah.
when we visited.
Leith is a suburb of Edinburgh, I think. Crazy.
Lennox besieged Edinburgh Castle and Edinburgh itself. So the castle and the town, which must have been rough.
Can't have been easy.
No. Grange spent a lot of his time reinforcing the castle's defences to make it an even harder nut to crack, knowing that it's a good spot to be in.
Yeah, if he can hold out and not have everyone starve to death, he's got a good chance.
There's a good chance he could win this. He didn't just fortify the castle, he also fortified the city.
Wow.
He built new defences on the Royal Mile, like at St Giles Kirk. So you can walk past that on your way up to the castle. Houses were deliberately burned on the outskirts of Edinburgh to create blockages.
Wow.
So you can't get through. And lots of streets were blocked up so that they had like dead ends, so you couldn't get through.
Oh.
To make them impassable, so people who were trying to take the city couldn't get around.
I mean, that's a good idea.
So they were doing the work. The whole town has become just a fortress and a war zone.
Yeah. It's pretty brutal, though. You have to burn down your people's homes to protect your people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're not really protecting the people.
Well, that's just it.
That's not what he's doing.
Oh,
He's protecting Mary's chance at becoming queen.
Yeah, I bet the person whose house got burned down wasn't that fussed. Brutal.
Wasn't that fussed about having their house burned down.
About who became king or queen.
Wasn't that fussed about having their house burnt. Like, what? I'm sure they were.
I wasn't in it. Who cares?
Grange managed to keep the siege going with help from nobles across Europe who still supported Mary, Catholic monarchs and Catholic nobles. And he even pawned off some of Mary's jewellery to pay for supplies and ammunition.
Right, all right, all right.
And inside the castle, he and some other men created a mint where they were making their own money. They were crafting their own coins that had Mary's name on them instead of James's.
Nice.
Which made them very easy to identify. So people on the outside knew that these coins were being made.
Yeah.
Which is counterfeiting. Which is a crime.
It's not great. It's not the best plan.
No, especially making them very obvious.
Yeah.
But because they're fighting for Mary, they can't very well make currency with someone they don't believe is king on it.
Ooh. That is true. That's a rock and a hard place right there.
But these coins are very easily noticed.
You can just pop down the chippy with one of them.
I mean, the chippy probably wouldn't care. Like, it has monetary value.
Oh, that's true, eh?
But this is going to come up later.
Okay.
Lennox and other supporters of James VI actually went to Queen Elizabeth I, asking her for help to break the siege because they couldn't get through. And with help from Elizabeth's camp, a kind of truce was made between the two sides for a little while. Edinburgh, the town, was no longer under siege, but Edinburgh Castle was.
I guess that's a bit better.
They came to an agreement so that the people of Edinburgh weren't being, killed and cut off. But Edinburgh Castle was still being held out.
Yes.
So the noose is kind of tightening around Grange now. He has a far smaller space to operate in.
Would that make it easier to defend or harder to defend? I don't know.
You can concentrate your supplies at least.
Yeah.
Because a smaller concentration of men would make it easier to defend better.
Postie. Had to just pause for the postie arriving.
I got some new dresses.
So the dog barked, and then I played it back to hear where we'd left off, and I played the recording of the dog barking, and I made the dog bark again. So we're just...
He's just a little chaos machine.
We're stuck in a cycle now.
So the nature of the siege has changed. Edinburgh Castle is now the focus. And this truce that they came to lasted between July 1572 and the 1st of January 1573.
Okay. About 6 months-ish.
Yeah. So I'd imagine this was a very good chance for the people who'd had their homes destroyed to rebuild and try and get their lives a bit more back to normal.
Before winter comes.
Well, through the winter, really, if it was until January.
Winter starts the 21st of December, I think. So there you go.
Have you ever been to Edinburgh for Hogmanay?
I have not.
Celebrate New Year?
Yep.
It's a big deal. Huge street party, lots of fireworks. It's a very good time from what I've heard. But the celebration for New Year's Day in 1573 went a little bit different.
Did it?
Just a little bit. Grange tried to beat back his opposition by basically bombing Edinburgh.
It's a bold move when you're supposed to be fighting for the correct monarch to come in for the people.
Yeah, you're bombing your own people. I'm sure people were kind of used to the siege by this point. It had been happening for a long time.
Yeah.
They had probably adjusted their lives around these very difficult circumstances. But I'm fairly positive they didn't expect to just be fired upon from the castle.
It's not like there's 30 cannons going off for a birthday or anything.
No, and this is the end of the truce period. So they haven't had to deal with this for a little bit. They had been before, but this is after a period of relative peace.
Yeah, they got a reprieve for a little while, and then that. Not good.
No, it's not a good look for Grange.
No.
On the other side, so on the side of the king, James Douglas, the Earl of Morton, was now regent of Scotland.
Okay.
Lennox had been killed in Stirling. And there was a Regent Mar in between, who died of natural causes.
Okay.
But some people wondered if Morton had poisoned him.
It's always a possibility. Now,
being a regent is a very dangerous job.
Well, I think being poisoned is natural causes when you're a regent or a king, isn't it?
Doesn't even count.
Yeah.
So we had Murray, then Lennox, then Mar, and now Morton.
Yep.
In a very short space of time.
Yes.
You don't have to remember all of these, but...
Is Morton going to bring the hammer down?
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically.
Spoiler, but yeah. Morton had trenches dug around Edinburgh Castle to make it easier to defend and attack from. And he also had St. Margaret's Well poisoned.
Ooh.
Which was one of only two sources of drinking water for the people inside the castle.
Yep.
Because if you remember, Edinburgh Castle is sitting on a massive big rock.
Yes.
It doesn't have its own natural water source.
No.
So there are two wells that the people there were depending on, and he poisoned one of them.
Eee.
So their situation inside the castle is now very dire.
Yep.
By February, Grange and his men within Edinburgh Castle were the only ones in the entire country who still supported Queen Mary.
Holding on to the end.
They are the only ones who've managed to hold out. Everyone else has given up or been forced to by this point. Edinburgh Castle was the last holdout for Mary.
The last bastion of the Catholic Queen.
Mm-hmm. And Grange was not for giving up. If anything, knowing this made him more dangerous.
Yeah. Well, he's got nothing to lose, really, does he? Because if he just gives up, he's not going to just be like, oh yeah, just back to where you were. No harm done.
Oh, we're going to get to that, actually. This caused problems for him later. They all managed to work around the severe shortage of drinking water because they still had the one well, the four well, which you can still see at the castle. They kept firing their guns on Edinburgh, hoping to diminish Morton's numbers, but killing a lot of civilians in the process.
Yep.
Because they're just firing into the town.
It's not good.
It's not good.
It's not good.
It's not a good look for him at all. Grange's men were actually ordered to sneak into Edinburgh from the castle and set houses on fire.
Oh.
Hoping that it would disrupt the work and the organisation of Morton's side.
Yeah.
But what's worse than that, if you can even imagine, is that if they spotted anyone, civilian or soldier, trying to put these fires out, they were ordered to shoot them.
Oh, why? Did somebody trying to put their own house out?
But they were ordered to shoot them because they wanted the fires to burn so that they would spread further and cause more problems.
Oh, what's the point of winning if you're going to burn Edinburgh to the ground?
This is the worst extreme of the ends justify the means.
Yep.
Because I'm sure in their heads they're like, no, this is a holy battle. This is the righteous cause. We're definitely the good guys. But yeah, they're just burning people's houses down.
Oh.
And then shooting them if they try to save themselves or save the town.
They're very much not.
It's not good.
It's not good, Jen.
April 1573. Forces from England have finally arrived in Edinburgh. About 1,000 of them, led by Sir William Drury. So they've received help from down south like they were hoping for. 27 cannons quickly followed this 1,000 men. And one of these cannons had actually been made at Edinburgh Castle.
Wow.
And captured by the English at the Battle of Flodden in 1513.
It's kind of cool.
And had now been wheeled back to attack Edinburgh Castle.
Ooh. I mean, when Grange is being that much of an asshole, I don't blame them.
It's nasty on all sides,
Yeah.
isn't it? Now, remember I said way back at the beginning, possibly last episode, that it's the east side of the castle that is the easiest to access from.
Yeah,
it's more of a gentle slope.
Yeah.
On the eastern side. That's where Morton based all of his forces once the reinforcements had arrived. They made their way up to Castle Hill and they planted all of the big guns there.
Just charge the front gate?
Pretty much, yeah.
Fair play.
And on the 17th of May, Morton's forces opened fire on Edinburgh Castle.
Oh.
For 12 days straight.
Jesus.
3,000 shots were fired at the castle.
Oh. Just day and night cannons firing at the castle.
Yep.
God damn.
And like smaller artillery units, but yeah, for 12 days.
Oh.
On the 22nd of May, David's Tower fell.
Wow.
And that's why you can't see it anymore. I talked about it last episode a bit more. It was almost completely broken down. It's just the lower parts and like the foundation that are left today.
Yes.
So this was when David's Tower fell, and the Constable's Tower also fell, which was a different part of the castle. So that's how much it's being bombarded.
Yeah.
Major parts of the castle are being completely crumbled.
After 12 days, I'm surprised it's not just a big pile of dust.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Now, it was during this part of the siege that the Four Well became full of debris.
Ah.
Everything's collapsing. Mm-hmm. It's all falling in on itself. And the one source of drinking water is now full of broken stone and just rubbish. So now Grange is really screwed. They have no water.
Yep.
And you only last about 3 or 4 days without any water.
What did he think was going to happen? Do you think they'd just stop and go home?
I guess just hopeful.
Was he waiting for reinforcements at all?
I'm not really sure. I'm guessing it would have been very difficult for reinforcements to reach him since they were the last.
Oh, that's true.
You know?
Hoping just all of France would sail in to sort it out.
Yeah, I guess.
Ooh.
Because there weren't really any reinforcements in Scotland. They had been beaten back.
Mm-hmm.
On the 26th of May, the outer part of the castle was attacked and captured by Morton and the English.
Mm-hmm.
So they've started breaking through the actual castle now. On the 27th of May, Grange appeared over the top of the wreckage at the top of a ladder. And he finally tried to come to some sort of a surrender. Now, he knew he was in a bad spot.
Well.
Because like you said earlier, it's not like he's going to be able to just go back to normal life after this. Mm-hmm. He tried to negotiate for his freedom, to come to some sort of agreement. But the other side, Morton's side, told him very quickly that even if they managed to negotiate a surrender, Grange would be imprisoned immediately for what he had done. So there was absolutely no chance of freedom for him. But if he agreed to surrender, they would let the men inside the castle go. There wouldn't be any repercussions for them.
Very good.
So when Grange heard this and heard these terms, he changed his mind about the whole thing.
Oh, what a dickhead.
He disappeared back into the castle, and he was now absolutely determined to stick it out or die trying.
Well,
because he knew if he was imprisoned, he would eventually be executed.
Yeah.
So he didn't really have anything to lose.
His men did.
Well, this conversation that Grange had with the other side wasn't private.
Nope.
Because he's standing on the castle walls on a big fucking ladder. So his men, all the men who made up the garrison inside the castle, had heard the terms, and they knew why Grange had changed his mind at their expense, and they were furious that he had done this.
He's just saving his own bacon. Mm-hmm. Oh, he's not even saving his own bacon.
He's just happy to die for it when they weren't.
Mm-hmm. So, well, my bacon's fried, so all your bacon's fried too.
So they had heard that surrender was possible, but Grange had given them up for his sake.
Oh, no.
They had heard him put himself before everyone else. And it's not a good look for a leader. There must
be a mutiny, surely.
Well, on the 28th, the next day, Grange allowed the English forces into the castle because there was a serious threat of mutiny and his own men were going to kill him.
Well, yeah.
If he didn't agree to these terms of surrender. So he did. But he was so petty that he only let the English forces in. He wouldn't let in Morton or the Scottish men.
What a dick.
It's like it's such a stupid thing.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't have it. He wouldn't give in to Morton, but he would give in to the English reinforcements who had come.
Yep. Did he feel good about that? Did that give him the moral high ground? But yeah, well, I've got this though.
I mean, I guess he has nothing now, so you have to feel like you have control some way.
Yeah.
I guess.
The matter of honour is minute, but it's important.
Yeah. The men who had stood with Grange holding the castle were all free to go, as had been promised. And there was no repercussions for them. Grange was captured, as expected.
Naturally.
But so were the two jewellers who had been making the counterfeit coins.
Well, I mean, you can't blame them for that one.
Yeah, they were also captured, and all three men were executed.
Yeah.
For their part in the siege.
It's not good.
No. Grange's brother was also executed. He had been captured at Blackness Castle a few months earlier. I don't know if he was executed at the same time, but he was also executed.
Yeah.
And the 3 men from the siege were hanged at the Market Cross, further down the Royal Mile from the castle, on the 3rd of August.
Wow.
So, 2 months later.
Wild.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess they had to start rebuilding the castle.
Yep, because there was nothing left. What's spooky is John Knox, who I mentioned earlier. He had actually predicted that Grange would die by hanging long before the siege began.
Oh, yeah?
He had this kind of prophecy about Grange. And Knox had died in 1572. So before Grange was actually executed.
Yeah.
So he didn't make it up after the fact.
That's funny.
But he had made a spooky prediction that that's how he was going to go.
Ooh. I mean, the winds were turning. The winds were blowing, you know.
Yeah. The Lang Siege is a pretty major part of Edinburgh Castle's history. Mm-hmm. Not least because it resulted in huge parts of the castle being blown to bits.
Well, yeah.
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 What do you think? What are you thinking?
Just that's wild. That's a crazy, epic tale. And the last hope for Mary, blown to smithereens.
Mm-hmm.
You can see why she didn't come back to Scotland.
She couldn't. She was kept in prison in England for the rest of her life. Then had her head chopped off.
Oh.
Yep. Not good for anybody.
Not good.
So that was Grange and the Lang Siege.
Wow. Mental.
It was after David's Tower came down that the Half Moon Battery was built. And that's one of the most recognisable features of the castle. It's the big semicircular bit that faces out the front to the esplanade. Mm-hmm. It's the bit, if you're walking up to visit the castle, that's the big round bit that you see.
It's very imposing.
Very grand looking. The esplanade, the bit you walk up, that didn't come until the 1700s. So you had the Half Moon Battery at this point, but it was just a big rocky hill.
Well, the esplanade's just a great place to set up to siege it. I can see why they didn't build that.
Yeah. It would make it very easy to just invite people to attack the front door.
Yeah, just, we've given you loads of space to organise yourselves before you charge. I can see why they didn't do that in a hurry.
So after all of that, we're now properly into the reign of King James VI.
God damn. So, yeah, that's a good point. What was he doing during this giant, long siege?
Well, he was still very young. He'd been born in 1566, and this was happening in 1573. Because remember, there's still regents ruling for him.
Yeah, that's true.
So it was only after all of this that he was properly made king.
So he's probably just being a 7-year-old boy and cracking around Stirling Castle, presumably.
Yes, Stirling Castle was the safest place for him. I think he was moved around a little bit just to keep him safe, because there was fighting happening in Stirling too. But he survived everything and became the good Protestant king that his supporters wanted him to be.
Yay. I wonder how he felt about like his mum being dethroned and stuff.
I mean, he didn't know her.
Yeah.
There's signs that he became more attached to her as he became an adult. Because he had a memorial built to her in Westminster Abbey, which hadn't been there. He held her quite reverently, but he didn't know her.
No. And then he will have been filled with what other people thought about her. He wouldn't have had a chance to make his own opinions.
So it's tricky.
Yeah, just a strange one.
I think he did care about her, but he didn't get to know her himself.
No.
Because they were separated so early.
Strange.
Painful.
Painful. Very painful.
In 1603, the Union of the Crowns happened.
Ba-da.
Which, again, we have talked about before. Queen Elizabeth died. James was the nearest heir, so he became king of England and Scotland. And it was after this union that James basically abandoned Scotland.
Buggered off.
Completely. He promised to return often, since this was his home, and the country that he had been ruler of for the past, technically 50 or so years.
Yep.
But he only came back once after the union, and he came back in 1617 for his Golden Jubilee. And that was it. It was the only time he came back. And for this visit, Edinburgh Castle had lots and lots of work done to get it nice and prepared for the king coming.
Absolutely.
So by this point, the castle is back in working order. It has been rebuilt and sorted after being sieged for such a long time.
Sieged to the ground on his behalf for him to not really care.
No, he just stayed in London. He never came back. Or he came back once.
Came back once. Does it count? I don't think it counts.
Always annoys me.
Oh, I know.
It's that little nugget. I'm just like, oh, I hate that.
Makes me roll my eyes and scoff.
Yeah, big time. So because of this, the purpose and the reputation of Edinburgh Castle was also changed. Prior to now, it's been this royal hub and this seat of power because the monarch was there, or the monarch spent time there. This is no longer the case.
That's a good point.
So it doesn't have the same royal cachet that it did before. Its purpose has changed. From here, it became more of a military hub.
Ah, okay.
Rather than a royal seat. It's where the base of operations for the Scottish military was.
Well, that makes sense, because that happened at Stirling Castle too, I think.
Yeah, just it changes over time. It had one sort of royal purpose, which I read about, because during his reign, James created the Baronetage of Nova Scotia.
Ooh.
Which granted those he favoured land in America and Canada.
Oh.
But part of the deal with becoming a baronet was that you had to, quote, symbolically receive the earth and stone of the land of which they were baronet, unquote.
Okay.
This is an issue if he's making people in Scotland and England baronets of places in North America and Canada. Because they can't really just go to have the ceremony and come back, because it was a very dangerous trip.
Yeah.
A pretty big commitment to go all the way over there just for that in the 1600s.
To receive some land that doesn't belong to you.
Yeah, basically. So, instead, it was agreed that you could, quote, take Sassine, which is what the ceremony was called, at Edinburgh Castle, instead of your land, heavily quoted there, your land, across the pond. Since the castle was, quote, the most eminent and principal place of Scotland, unquote.
Seems a bit of a get-out-of-jail-free card, really, doesn't it?
This is the most important Scottish place, so this means you're in charge of this bit of Canada.
Yep. But you never have to go there. You don't have to do anything with it. You'll just be in charge of it. Because presumably it was more of a kind of honorary title.
Oh, yeah, because there's only a limited number of titles you can grant in the UK. It's not that big.
Yeah.
And if you start taking land from other title holders, we've seen how that goes in the past. They get really pissy.
Pissed.
So he's having to find new land to favour people. It's a very strange system. But this proves that Edinburgh Castle did still have some symbolic importance, even though James had cleared off.
Yes.
It's a weird concept.
It is really strange. Very strange. Do these baronetages, barons, still exist?
I think so. I think the titles still exist.
Yeah.
But sometimes they sort of naturally die off. Like if they don't have heirs to take them on, the title disappears. Or we've seen over time in other episodes, the title and the land get separated to different heirs. Sometimes the title gets stripped if they've upset the king.
Just it's an odd thought today there being a baronet of Nova Scotia down in the House of Lords.
I think they do still exist.
Weird.
It's its own system. And quite a lot of the time they're in the UK.
Its own very stupid made up system.
Well, yeah, it's just playing pretend.
Yeah.
It's giving people a pretend shot at getting closer to the crown.
So bizarre.
It's very strange.
Very strange.
In 1633, we've covered a lot today.
We have covered a lot.
Charles I was crowned.
Hooray!
I know, you don't have to feel one way or the other. But he was the very last king or queen to stay overnight at Edinburgh Castle.
Really?
Which he did the night before his coronation in Scotland, to make him the King of Scotland.
Oh, so did he have two coronations?
Seems like it, yes.
Oh, interesting.
He was the last monarch to do that.
Wow.
No one's done it since then. We've talked about Charles a lot before, because you can't really talk about him without talking about the Covenanters.
Ah, yes.
It's the hallmark of his reign in my head, and even the reign of his son. So we're going to talk about that next week.
Ooh.
And how he got on. Wow. And more sieges.
More sieges?
More sieges.
How is it still standing? Man, this is an epic saga of Edinburgh Castle, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. We are in the mid-1600s now.
Oh my God.
We're at the end of part 2.
All of that was like 150 years. God damn.
You see why this is taking me so long.
God damn.
And this isn't even everything. This isn't even everything.
These are still just the nuggets.
Do you know how much I've had to edit?
The historical nuggets from Eilidh's brain to our ears.
Thank you very much for listening to me ramble about Edinburgh Castle for another hour and a half straight.
Hooray!
And thank you, Kieran, for listening to me ramble about Edinburgh Castle for another hour and a half straight.
Oh, you're so welcome.
I appreciate it. We will be back next week with part 3.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully this week the episode goes up without a hitch.
Yes, fingers crossed.
But as ever, if you would like access to the episode a whole day early, head over to Patreon.
Mm-hmm.
We post it there on a Thursday, so you get it before anyone else.
Yep.
Along with lots of extra goodies.
It's a good place to be. It's a good place to support us. If you want a no-cost way to support us, you can leave us a review on your podcast player.
Mm-hmm. And we're on Instagram if you want Odin updates, because I post photos of him all the time.
All the time.
Because he's stinking cute.
He was a very good boy this episode.
He has been lying asleep this whole time. And I bet you guys wouldn't even know he was here.
I know, apart from the post he arrived.
He's like a little shadow.
Podcast shadow.
He's not even listening. He's still asleep.
Yep.
We're saying his name and he's not even paying attention. Because Kieran took him for a 5k run 2 days ago.
And he was not okay about it.
But we'll be back next week.
Yes, we will. Bye.
Bye.